Hi, today we're going to be talking about the struggles of being a starter and not a finisher. If you struggle to finish things you start, this video is for you. Welcome back to the Thrive Clan. This is a space for leaders, executives, elite performers to work on their most critical asset, their well-being. And I'm your host, Judith Badebo. I am a psychologist and a well-being partner. If you'd like to work with me on a personal level, the details are in the description below. So let's get into the video. What is difficulty finishing? What does that even mean? And why are we even talking about it? Difficulty finishing is something that some people experience, and it's much more common than you would think. It typically comes from the novelty seeking self, as opposed to the effort-focused self. So if you're someone who loves to start projects, you're always excited about pioneering something. And when it, gets to the point where, things are much more stable, all it needs is continuous effort, repetitive task, certain things that just seem almost mundane to you, you are seeking the next thing to start again. You are always stuck in pitching. You're always stuck in starting something new. You're always stuck in the new idea, founding new projects, things like that. Then you might be someone who is a starter and maybe not a finisher. And how does this show up, really? How does this show up and how does this affect you as a person? And then what can we do about it? There's usually a new project high, right? There's this dopamine of discovery. You have something new to do. It's exciting. You have this uninformed optimism about whatever project it is that you are, putting yourself into. And if you are not careful, because of how creative, of course, elite performers can be, right? You start something, new ideas pop up. You don't know that it looks so shiny, it looks so great. Maybe because right now where you are in the current project you are working on is stalled, right? Maybe you've gotten to a point where it's not as exciting, it's not as novel, right? You are no longer interested, right? You want to delegate or you want to just get yourself out of it. You're looking for the shiny new thing. You are always looking for that new clean slate, something you can start afresh because it feels like, oh yeah, pioneering something. What it means so many things to you, really. It can mean so many things to you. Starting something new can look like, I'm very curious about this. I believe in something. I'm going to start it, bring it from scratch. I'm going to birth it, right? And, it becomes very beautiful for you. But then it gets to the mundane. It gets to the admin. It gets to the task that just feel very, not like what you envisioned, which are elements that, of course, matter, and keep the system running, but they no longer are interesting to you. If you find that you are constantly in the loop of starting things, that cycle, what can you do about it? You're in that cycle. So now the way it's showing up for you now is that you abandon projects midway. So you start something excited. You have that high initially because it's clean slate. It's uninformed optimism. I'm excited. I can pitch. I can communicate my ideas. Yes, everyone tells me this is an amazing thing, right? I don't have all the information that is going to weigh me down, right? But then I start it. And then once it gets to the point where, the mundane starts, I let it go. Pick up something else again, start. Once it gets to the mundane task, I let it go. You continue like that. For how long can this be, really? And how far can we really take it? Because what this does is that it doesn't allow for us to get to a state of mastery. It doesn't allow for us to get to a state of depth in whatever sphere of life it is that we are in whatever industry it is that we are operating in. And it can also show up as imposter syndrome because while you are a very skilled and talented person, you're someone who is spread thin, right? You're not someone with depth. So you have a little knowledge about a lot of things, but not in a constructive way that allows for your personal growth. For you, it's like, yes, I know a good number of things, but it's not giving you the depth that is required for you to actually grow and blossom. And that's why when you're put in a new space, you feel like, yeah, I know enough, but I don't know enough to be so good at it. So for the most part, you feel like a fraud. And imposter syndrome, of course, is not something you'll be able to shake off in such a space, right? Because you are not allowing yourself to go deeper, or at least deep enough for mastery. That's a way that it can also affect you. And part of the reason why we always talk about the ways it can affect you is it can be adaptive to some degree. So typically when we choose a behavior or whatever behavior it is we're engaging in, choosing consciously or unconsciously, is serving us in some capacity, right? It's always doing something for us, but it can also be very detrimental to us at the same time. So two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that something makes me, feed my curiosity. It makes me expose myself to different spheres, of interest. But it also can affect me in building mastery. It also can affect me in building depth of knowledge, wealth of experience that I otherwise would have if I stick to something, through the mundane, through the uninteresting, through the boring stages of whatever the task entails of me. Another way it can show up is where if you are someone who relies only on the motivation. So, like we already said, it gets mundane. When it's gotten mundane, your willpower, of course, has dipped. Your motivation dipped. What are you going to do? You let it go. And now you struggle. You are now the person known as the quitter. You are the person who has had multiple jobs. For the most part, it's not a problem to quit, but you also have to do it in a very constructive manner. You want to know the timeline. You want to know that you're actually designing your life, not in a way where, oh, I'm simply quitting. And then when you, in hindsight, look at a decade worth of your life, you now start seeing that, there seems to be a pattern here. And this pattern doesn't seem to be one that is helping me, because what I notice here is, I might have excuses that seem relevant and valid in the moment. But in hindsight, there are people who stayed. And it's not that you want to just stay when it's not working for you any longer. We always want to know the right time to do certain things, which is, of course, very, very relative, right? It's not something anyone can teach you or tell you, but you also have to be very, very honest with yourself. Because if you are someone who doesn't reflect well, if you're someone who just finds the closest excuse to let go of things when it becomes uninteresting or is not as you expected any longer, you will struggle, and you struggle much longer, because you will be known as now that quitter. Because you can be a quitter, but when you choose something, make sure you choose to finish it as well. Don't quit. Start something, quit again, start something, quit again. No. Whatever it is you decide you want to start, try to finish it. Or at least get to the point where even if you're not going to be the one to finish it to its entirety, you create systems that make sure it doesn't suffer. So maybe you are now going to have a CEO. If you're stepping down, right? The CEO carries on. Okay. Maybe what's going to happen is there's another element to the industry that you are more curious about, and your strengths lie in. So as opposed to where your strengths were in the beginning, you notice, maybe this element to my work is where I notice my strength to be in right now. My curiosity to be in as well. And I go there and I give myself finishing line so that I can actually see it through to the end. That's where the solutions come in. So let's see what we can do about it. If you're someone who is a starter, okay, if you're someone who starts and never finishes, what can you then do about it? We've talked about how it typically shows up, right? Now let's talk about what we can do about it. The first thing I want you to do about it is define what done looks like. So before you jump into the new thing, define what it means to complete this thing. So for you, it might be you are going into a job, right? What does done look like? Is the skill set I want to make sure I've achieved, right? Is this the amount of experience, maybe cases, for example. So maybe you're a surgeon. I want to partake in this number of surgeries, right? I want to write a paper, I want to collaborate on a QIP, whatever the case may be. Right? Decide what that looks like. What does done look like for you? So that it's not that there was never any yardstick to great success, essentially, right? Or maybe, I decided to start a project, right? Does it mean when I get to my minimum viable product, and it's created, it's ready, right? And we've gotten it to this point, then I can say, this is done for my inputs, so I can have someone else carry on. But define what done looks like. Yes, I'm not saying, do it forever, but to make sure you are a finisher and not just a starter, define done before you even commence. Yes, life happens. Yes, we can't plan for everything in its entirety, but you still want to know, what am I expecting out of this, right? Or, maybe financially, okay, I have this number as a goal, right? Or maybe I'm targeting stability. Maybe I'm targeting freedom. Maybe I'm targeting financial independence, whatever that looks like. What does done look like? Okay, decide what that is so that you can commit yourself through to that process. Another thing to do again is, because you are wired for novelty, right? Break whatever project it is you have into different, stages. Okay, so the first stage, this is where it starts, this is where it gets completed. Okay, then we move to the next stage. Okay, so maybe the first step is ideation, right? Solidify what the idea is for this project. That's step one. You are done. It's completed. Good. The next thing is, oh, am I getting partners? Okay, so what then does that look like? Who are these partners, working towards getting it? Oh, I'm talking to these people. I'm pitching, I'm communicating the value proposition, whatever the case may be. You get it to that point and then you're done. You've secured partners. Good. What's the next thing? You have it broken down into different elements. So you know that, it doesn't feel repetitive. It's still a business, but there are elements to it that has been broken. That has been broken down through the stages and steps that they require. So it feels like, oh, I've completed this element. Now we go to the next element. Oh, now it's go to market. Oh, now it's, test it out. Oh, now we want to do the mom test. Let's even ask questions. Let's even be sure that what we're trying to create is actually relevant to the market that we're actually creating it for. Whatsoever the case may be, break it down. Okay, let's just not work on an arbitrary basis. Let's work with specifics. It will help you, especially if you're someone who seeks novelty. It's not a problem to seek novelty. It's not a problem to identify our strengths, our weaknesses. It's to dance around it and make sure those strengths are able to become even stronger. Okay, and we can help support ourselves through our weaknesses, essentially. Then the last thing I want you to also look at is, let's try to restructure cognitively, because with things like this, if it's something you've done for a length of time, it can be a struggle. When you get to that block, it's like, I can't think clearly. I'm fed up. I need a change. I need something new. This feels monotonous. This feels, bland to some degree. Okay, let's allow ourselves first with compassion, but then also allow yourself to restructure it. Is there another way for me to look at this situation I'm currently in? Right? Is there another way to think about this thing? So while I find this to be monotonous, right? Is there something I can learn from this monotony? Because something to note, even with the monotonous, task, is that you might be getting to a stage where for you it feels like, oh, I'm not growing. But actually you are getting to a different level in your skill set, right? You're getting to a different plateau. So what does that look like? Cognitive restructuring is done by creating a balanced way of looking at things, by thinking about it from another person's lens. So you might invite somebody else to this conversation. Oh, this is how I've been thinking about this thing. I'm most likely maybe an older colleague, so someone who has experienced similar. Oh, you've been doing surgeries. At some point, does it feel like, it just feels like I'm just going to the theater and it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. What keeps you going? And the person shares. Talk to another person, the person shares. What you are doing is you're inviting different lenses to see the exact same situation. And you're able to see that, oh, my view, while valid, is not the only view to reality. Okay. And this helps you to create more of a balanced way of thinking about it. Okay. So you can make an informed decision thereafter. So you can decide, oh, I understand it now. There's a reason why this older colleague, now feels at ease, in this kind of setting, because, of course, how much exposure he has, right? Or maybe even if he feels some level of anxiety, it's not the debilitating kind he used to have in the past, because now he almost can recognize the patterns. Because sometimes what that monotony does also, it helps with pattern recognition, because you now start doing things instinctively, where experience is the only thing that could have brought you there. Really, you have to have lived it. No one can teach you. You recognize, oh, this equal to this. Okay, so please, let's be patient with ourselves. Okay, that'll be all for the video today. If you've noticed that you're a starter, remember to be compassionate with yourself. That's why I chose to end it with cognitive restructuring, really, right? Allow yourself to think more balanced about it. Okay, don't be so isolated in it, because there's the tendency to blame oneself. Oh, I typically start things, I'm a quitter. Even though it's glorified these days, right, there's still that shame that can come with it, especially if you don't have clarity of what next. Am I going to just quit the next thing that I'm excited about? Or is it even worthwhile that I jump into the next thing? Is it just a novelty high right now? Should I give it time before I go into it and see if it's actually a valid thing? Should I even be the one to do it? Maybe I have this idea, it's great. I think about it, discuss with other people, and have them, execute instead of me executing it, right? Do I allow myself more time to buy me mastery, to buy me skill set that experience is the only thing that could teach me? That'll be all for the video today. Remember, the Thrive Clan is a place for leaders to be themselves outside of the pressures of perfection. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.